Mafia 3 is the most divisive game in the Mafia trilogy. When it launched back in 2016, people praised the story but criticized the repetitive mission structure and the bugs and technical issues it launched with. Fast forward to 2026 and we now have Mafia 3 Definitive Edition, developed by Hangar 13 and published by 2K in 2020, which includes all of the DLC and years of patches and updates. So looking at it today, is Mafia 3 really as bad as people say? Personally, I don't think so. The criticism about repetitive missions is fair, but I think it overshadows everything the game does well. Mafia 3 is one of the best stories in gaming, the strongest gameplay in the Mafia trilogy, and an incredibly immersive open world. Mafia 3 takes the series in a completely different direction. Instead of playing as an Italian-American mobster, you play as Lincoln Clay, a black Vietnam veteran returning home to New Bordeaux after the war. After a brutal betrayal destroys the family he grew up with, Lincoln sets out on a revenge mission against the people responsible. What I like most about the story is that it feels fresh compared to the first two games. It's still a crime story with mob politics and organized crime, but because Lincoln isn't actually a member of the Mafia, it avoids feeling like another traditional mob movie. The presentation is one of the game's biggest strengths. The story is told through a mix of cutscenes and documentary-style interviews with people who knew Lincoln. It feels like a true crime documentary at times, and it makes the whole thing feel more grounded and believable. The writing is excellent throughout, the characters are memorable, the voice acting is fantastic, and there are plenty of emotional moments that hit hard. I personally prefer the story to Mafia Definitive Edition. Mafia 2 is a tougher comparison because Vito is such a great character, but I think Mafia 3 deserves far more credit than it gets when it comes to storytelling. Gameplay is where Mafia 3 differs from the previous games. The shooting feels much better than it did in the first two games. Weapons have more impact, better sound design, and stronger recoil, making combat feel much more satisfying. Stealth is also a huge improvement. Lincoln has access to a variety of takedowns, both lethal and non-lethal, and most encounters can be approached however you want. The driving is also excellent. You can choose between normal and simulation handling, although I personally prefer normal because it feels more enjoyable during missions and car chases. The cars have a good sense of weight and are simply fun to drive around the city. Lincoln himself is basically a one-man army. He's a highly trained soldier and the gameplay reflects that. Whether you're sneaking through a compound or going in guns blazing, combat is consistently fun. The biggest criticism of Mafia 3 is the mission structure, and honestly, I understand why. Most of the game revolves around taking over rackets, damaging criminal operations, and slowly working your way towards taking control of an entire district. The problem is that this structure doesn't change much throughout the game. You're often doing the same type of objective over and over again in different parts of the map. The repetition is definitely there. The reason it never bothered me as much as it did other people is because I enjoyed the gameplay itself. The shooting, stealth, and driving were fun enough that I never got tired of the loop. I also really like the empire building side of the game. As you take over districts, you decide which of your underbosses gets control of them. You can spread everything out evenly or favor certain characters depending on who you like. The Definitive Edition also includes all three story expansions. Faster Baby focuses heavily on driving and vehicle combat, while telling a story about taking down a corrupt sheriff in a small white-only town outside of New Bordeaux. It also adds a new area to explore and some extra ways to make money. Stones Unturned takes Lincoln along with John Donovan into an island in the Gulf of Mexico as they hunt down a rogue operative who Donovan knew in Vietnam. It's much more action-focused than the main game and is far more linear. Sign of the Times is probably the most unique DLC. It revolves around a cult operating in New Bordeaux and has a much darker atmosphere than the rest of the game. It's not really a horror, but it definitely has some creepy moments and a very different tone. All three expansions are surprisingly substantial and help break up some of the repetition from the main game. Performance-wise, Mafia 3 is still limited to 30 FPS on modern consoles, which won't be ideal for everyone, but personally I never found it to be a major issue as it is a pretty smooth 30 FPS and most of the technical problems from launch have long been fixed. Resolution wise, the Xbox Series X runs the game at 1728p and the PS5 runs it at a slightly lower 1440p. New Bordeaux is probably my favourite setting in the Mafia trilogy. Unlike the first two games where the city mostly acts as a backdrop for the story, Mafia 3 is a proper open world game with things to do outside the main story. The city itself is fantastic. Each district feels distinct from one another. Delray Hollow, River Row, Point Verdun all have their own look and atmosphere. One of the most interesting aspects of the world is how it handles racism. Because the game is set in the American South during the 1960s, Lincoln is treated differently. Police officers and civilians react to him in ways that reflect the time period, which help makes the setting feel more authentic. Another huge highlight is the soundtrack. The radio is packed with classic songs from the 1960s and does an incredible job at bringing the world to life. It's one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming, not just the Mafia trilogy. Combined with the radio adverts, architecture, and overall atmosphere, New Bordeaux feels like a real place. Visually, I would say Mafia Definitive Edition is still the better looking game, but I still really like Mafia 3's art style. It's much grittier and has a slightly washed out look, which fits the darker tone of the story. So, was Mafia 3 really that bad? For me, no. The repetitive mission structure is a genuine flaw, and it does hurt the pacing at times, but I think a lot of people focus so heavily on that one issue that they overlook everything else the game does well. The story is excellent, Lincoln Clay is a great protagonist, and the gameplay is the strongest in the trilogy. Also, New Bordeaux remains one of the most immersive worlds Hangar 13 has ever created. If you're looking for a short and tightly paced crime story, Mafia Definitive Edition or Mafia 2 Definitive Edition might be the better choice. But if you want a great revenge story, fun gameplay, a fantastic soundtrack, and a huge amount of content with all of the DLC included, I think Mafia 3 Definitive Edition is absolutely worth playing in 2026.